Hello and welcome to the Podawakens. My name is Jordan, and we are continuing our High Republic Road to the Acolyte Phase 1 coverage here, talking Test of Courage. And my guest today is Brandon. How are you today, Brandon?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Doing well. Doing well. Thanks for coming on and
Absolutely.
picking this book.
Oh, I mean, I will literally take any opportunity I can to talk about Test of Courage.
Awesome. So I have a little bit of questions that I usually like to ask our guests, especially when it's their first time on the show. So first, favorite Star Wars movie?
So I have a favorite emotional movie, and then I
Mhm.
have a favorite. I think it's the best one. My
Okay.
favorite emotional movie is Return of the Jedi.
Right.
That one I grew up pretending to be sick so I could skip school and watch it on repeat. Um, the movie that I think is the best and is my modern favorite is Last Jedi for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, I like Last Jedi as well. So I like
Good.
when people enjoy The Last
It's such a good movie.
Jedi.
Like
It
I just
is.
I get having critiques for a movie, but the level of disregard and hate that it gets just blows my mind. I'm like, are we watching the same movie?
Same. Yeah. No, it is. I saw that one 5 times in theaters, and I that was the most. It's the most I've ever seen a film, and when I walked out the first time, I was like, I think that might be the my favorite Star Wars film. It changes so much for me
Yeah,
nowadays that
yeah.
it's hard to really pick one. I've kind of went back to Empire being my favorite, but um, I like them all. I like all Star Wars, so it's all good.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
How about favorite trilogy?
Oh, this is hard because again, there's the emotional one. I grew up a
Hmm.
prequels kid, so
Right,
those are
same.
my go-to movies. Um, but I do think the original trilogy is the best for sure. Uh, it just the themes that it lays out, the cohesion of it, the simplicity of it in a very good way, in terms of how it conveys the myths is just absolutely mind-boggling, and we wouldn't have everything else without it, you know. So there's that aspect too.
Yeah, I agree. Probably original trilogy for me. It's probably the most cohesive of the
Yeah,
three.
yeah. Like the prequels got a lot better because of Clone Wars and stuff,
Yes,
and
yeah.
those additional stories told for sure.
Okay, how about favorite character? This could be anything, I guess. Favorite book
Oh,
character, favorite movie
this
character,
is
whatever.
this is easy. It's Ahsoka Tano.
Awesome. Yeah, I
Um,
see your Ahsoka
I,
poster behind
yeah,
you.
I've got Ahsoka art everywhere.
Oh
I
wow, yeah.
have my Ahsoka red and black
That
tattoo
is awesome.
there. She is, oh man, to say that she is important to my personal journey and maturity and development is the understatement of my life. Um, Somehow every time I'm going through a hard time, there's an Ahsoka story that exists to pull me out of it and to help me understand it more. And it still blows my mind how amazing, and how connected to that character I am.
That's awesome. Did you watch Clone Wars when it was first airing and kind
No,
of
actually,
stuck
I
with you,
didn't.
or catch up later?
I caught up later. I fell out of Star Wars for a solid 10, 12 years
Mm,
before the Disney purchase. Not necessarily disliking it, just kind of, life changes, and
yeah,
I was a teenage boy and stuff. And so I kind of came back to that at this point when I was really transitioning in my life, and I started listening to podcasts and everybody's talking about Clone Wars. I was like, I guess
hmm,
I could give this animation thing a try, even though animation is not Star Wars. But and
yeah,
then now animation is literally the core of my Star Wars. And just seeing her walk away from the Jedi Order at this time in my life where I felt like I was really walking away from expectations and standards that other people set for me was just extremely validating.
that's awesome. Yeah, I had kind of watched some of Clone Wars when it was airing. Um, and that it was, before I had DVR and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So it's like this era of, and then you had to buy the DVDs because it wasn't streaming anywhere at that time. Because streaming wasn't really a thing. So I had
Yeah.
I'd have to catch up like after the show's done at times, and then I kind of slipped out of it for a bit of Clone Wars, and then you start hearing more talk about because I remember when Ahsoka was first revealed in the movie and people hated her.
Yeah.
And then you started seeing it swing the other way. of people being like, "Oh my god, she's so great," that I was like, I really have to like go back and finish watching this show.
I really feel like I had the benefit of knowing that her character does something really phenomenal at the end of the story. Like I didn't have
Yeah,
that for me somehow, because I came to it so late. You would just assume that it would be spoiled, but getting to knowing that her character is a character that develops across the series, and that who we got at the very beginning, which is not the most enjoyable character, but that's also part of the point. Like, characters are supposed to develop. We don't judge a character purely off of the first 5 minutes of their appearance on screen, a la Luke
right.
Skywalker in The Last Jedi. And so getting I think, streaming really changed the game in terms of Ahsoka fandom, because so many people got to revisit Clone Wars,
Yeah.
especially when Rebels was coming out. That was a real game changer, and I don't know if we would have the Ahsoka series or the even season 7 of Clone Wars were it not for its streaming on Netflix.
No, I think you're right. Disney was very, let's lean away from prequel stuff
Yeah.
because they were reacting to 1999. you know,
Yeah.
uh,
And then they realized we're the ones that have the money now. We're the ones that
yes,
are buying the things now. And they're like, "Oh,
and
actually, we love you guys."
it was doing well on Netflix, and then they
Yeah.
got the rights to it, and they're like, all right, yeah, let's go ahead and let's
But
continue it.
yeah, exactly.
All right, I'm gonna split this one up into two then, since you said animation is your core. But how about favorite live action TV show and favorite animated TV show?
Uh, Favorite animated TV show is easily Rebels.
Same.
That's probably my favorite piece of Star Wars content, at all. It's definitely my favorite version of Ahsoka. Is that teacher? I'm a teacher myself, so that teacher kind of mentality that she has there. And then the Ahsoka series is my favorite live action one. I don't think it's the best of the live actions. I definitely think Mandalorian, and there's an argument to be made, even the overall storyline of Obi-Wan is a little crisper. But for me, just the emotional connection that I had with Ahsoka, I was immediately invested in there. Getting to see her facing such darkness in herself, and to see her facing this failure that she had with Sabine and coming to terms with it and coming to peace with herself is a very powerful thing.
Yes, a fellow Rebels enjoyer. Yeah, that's my favorite as well. For me, Rebels has always been better for me because it has the character development of those core
Yeah.
group of rebels. You don't get like your one off, oh, here's R2's episode where it's just R2 for the episode. As much as I
Yeah.
love R2, it's like, okay, I would kind of want to see some of the other characters. But Rebels really just continues the core group of Ezra, Hera, Kanan, Sabine, and all that.
And it develops each of them so perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
Like in an ensemble show, it's really easy to let characters fall to the wayside, but you even get, like, Zeb would be a prime candidate for that, to just be there to be funny and be the muscle.
Yeah.
But you got really good character development with him, and his the way that it speaks to the experience and the impact of trauma on our lives is, uh, to me, foundational to Star Wars, which I
Okay.
don't know if it was before Rebels, which is pretty cool.
How about gaming? Have you played any of the games in the past?
I'm not much of a gamer. I've played a little bit of the Lego Skywalker Saga.
Mm.
I've got actually, you'll enjoy this. I've got my old Game Boy with the Rebels stickers
Oh,
on
that's
it.
really nice.
Yeah, right. So that's about as advanced at gaming as I am. Is the Lego
Nice.
games on there?
How about favorite? Did you read any of the old expanded universe, or are you really
I've
dived
hit
into the new stuff when it
I've
came
hit
out?
some of it. I'm much more of a new expanded universe person. Um, the Young Jedi Knight series I read growing up. The Han Solo
Mm,
trilogy I read growing up. Those were really important stories for me. But like I said, I kind of like fell away from it for a little while.
right.
So I was reading a lot of other things other than Star Wars.
Okay, so I guess we'll. Is the High Republic your favorite of the new stuff, or is it something else?
No, funnily enough, it as much as I love the High Republic and I love the book that we're going to talk about today, the one-off books are the ones that work much better for me. So thinking about my favorite is easily Inquisitor: Rise of the Red Blade. That's my favorite book of all time.
Oh wow.
It is so insanely good, and I don't know if have you read it yet?
I haven't gotten to that one yet. No.
Okay, so I won't go into spoilers, but it really talks about and shows what happens when the institutions that are supposed to help build us up fail us, and the mental and emotional impact that has. And it shows, whereas a lot of stories we would get show the positive of how you can get out of that, this story really shows the dangers of what happens when um, you don't have the support that you need, and the impact of such trauma, and when what you believe your true nature is not something that is accepted by society. Which for me, I'm autistic, I have ADHD, like I've got a whole bunch of stuff going on, so I always felt like the outcast in society didn't really accept me. And so I started immediately connecting with this character in the book, and then all of a sudden it's like, wow, this went really dark really quickly, and it's like, thank God I didn't go that way. Here's how I cannot go that way. So it
Right.
really gets you thinking a lot about those kind of things.
Interesting. Um, High praise for that book. So I'll have to check it out.
Well worth it. Well worth it.
How about favorite High Republic book? Is it the one that you chose today?
It is. It's definitely Test of Courage. We'll get more into it, but Justina Ireland is my jam.
Hmm.
I love all of her stuff. I love the characters in it and everything about it.
And favorite character in the High Republic?
Vernestra Rowe, easily Vernestra. I don't know if she's top 10 Star Wars characters for me quite yet, but she's definitely on the path to becoming that. I'm reading Defy the Storm right now, and that is developing her character even more, and showing what happened after Starlight Beacon and how that really impacted her, and it's pretty cool.
How about favorite phase? Have you? Is it phase 1 or?
I actually think it's phase 2.
Interesting.
The YA novels in particular, I think, were absolutely phenomenal. I also think that it limited the number of characters that we had, which is one of the issues I had with phase 1 of High Republic, is there were so many characters that it was hard to invest in everybody. And a lot of times you would get invested in one character, like me with Orla Jareni, and then you don't get their character developed, and then spoiler alert, she dies. And I'm like, but she had a white lightsaber like Ahsoka. I need more of
Right.
that. And anything, give me a white lightsaber and I am on board. But phase 2 was just really, really crisp and clean. And I like that it had a clear ending, but it also left a lot to be answered, which I think we're going to get more of in phase 3, which I am really enjoying so far.
Awesome. So far I have. So I guess the way that I kind of got into the High Republic is, I was really excited about, like post Rise of Skywalker. One of the things I wanted was um, them to explore a whole new era of Star Wars. And then, like, really, like, just a couple months later, they announced the High Republic initiative that they were doing. And so I read Light of the Jedi, like, when it first came out. That took me a little bit to get into. It felt like a little slow start for me until we really got to meet the Jedi that I wanted to meet,
Yeah.
So really Rising Storm is what really made me be like, okay, I'm bought in, because I didn't understand at first when I was first picking this stuff up, like how important it would be to read everything, right? Like
Yeah.
that is something I'm getting into now with when I decided to do this initiative to build up to the Acolyte is, all right, let me go and actually read every little thing. And that is something I'm enjoying now, kind of seeing like little pieces. So I'm kind of I'm experiencing this in a different order than like what it was released in.
Right.
So I read like all of the adult ones, and now I'm going back and reading everything else. And so that's been really interesting for me. Like these I've been doing a lot of the audiobooks for, because I was on vacation and I actually drove from Maryland to Florida.
Oh, that is quite
And
the trip.
like 14 hours or whatever.
Yeah.
So I finished this audiobook on one of my trips, and then I started reading Test of Courage physically from my library, and then once I finished Into the Dark, Audible, like on the audiobook, I then flipped over to, like, oh, I have to drive now, so let me listen to this one as we're heading home, and then I listened to Out of the Shadows. So I got like a Vernestra like double pack that day when I was
Yeah, that's
driving.
awesome.
But so that is something that I've been kind of picking up on, is what your point was on phase two, which I had already started reading phase two before I was like, oh, let me go back and read like these phase one.
Right.
So I kind of got the same. I read Convergence is where I started,
Mhm.
and I didn't know how much I would enjoy it because of, for people that don't know, and we're not going to spoil it too much, but phase two goes backwards in time from phase one by quite a chunk.
Yeah, like
And
50 to 100 years.
yeah, and it's like, okay, like, I like these characters in phase one, and it left on a cliffhanger of Starlight
Yeah.
Beacon and all that stuff. It's like, how do we move forward? Like, why are we going backwards? But Convergence, like, the characters I really enjoyed in that book, and I think going forward, if it is like less characters in phase two, then that's going to be a pretty big bonus, because phase one does have quite a lot of characters, probably because of Starlight Beacon and wanting to
Yeah.
make sure that there was some stakes when they inevitably killed off some of these characters.
Yeah, a lot of these
Yeah.
characters. Um, yeah, you those of us who have been, in it since the beginning, like that is kind of the mentality we've drawn is like just assume that your favorite character is going to die, which terrifies me a little bit. But I actually was rereading the adult novels of Phase One while I was reading Phase Two, and it's really cool when you do that. And you'll probably experience this since you're kind of jumping around, but there will be little mentions in phase one of something when you first read it, it didn't really hit you or impact you. And then you have phase two, and it's like all of a sudden everything makes sense. And so that's the it's a really beautiful way that they've crafted this story in taking advantage of the iterative style of Star Wars storytelling, where you can jump around to different things and be able
Hmm.
to keep up with the overarching storyline. And it kind of creates a different Star Wars experience for everybody, which is really true to Star Wars. You have people who come in through the animation, who come in through the novels, who come in
Right.
through, like, there's people whose first movie was Empire Strikes Back. You're like right in the middle of literally everything.
Yep.
And then there's other people whose first Star Wars movie was probably Rise of Skywalker, and you're coming in at the end of things. So there's all these different ways to take in Star Wars, and so I like that they've kind of taken advantage of that with the High Republic.
Yeah, something that I noticed after listening to Convergence and reading that was, obviously I knew Irem from, I think it was Fallen Star that it featured in,
Yeah,
and but just the fact that, like, then I went back to read Into the Dark. I had like started Into the Dark, fell off of it, and then I was like, I need to restart it. I had to
yeah,
go back and just fully restart it. And then they have that whole like 25 years in the past thing where they're talking about Iram and Arano back then too. And I was like, geez, like, yeah, they are stuff that I didn't think was going to be super relevant into, like you said, there's like hints and stuff, planets and stuff that come back in different stuff. So it's been quite the experience here.
the High Republic board with all the red string somewhere is
Yeah.
keeping like Hobby Lobby and Michaels in business right now, because yeah, it just the way that they've crafted it is uh I've said often, and I still really, really believe this, that this was the testing ground for the future of Star Wars. Can we tell new stories? Can we tell
Hmm.
these interconnected stories successfully? If we plan this far ahead, are we going to have the flexibility to tell the stories we want to tell, hit what the fans want to have? And that's something that, as much as I love the sequel trilogy, and I really, really do, it's clear that they didn't have that same kind of bulletin board with here's how
Yeah.
everything's going to be connected. And you so it provides a lot of flaws. There are very few flaws in the High Republic in terms of either logic or connections or anything like that. It is you could have published all of this at the same time, and it would have worked just as well as, doing it over these 7 years or however long it's been at this point.
All right, so I guess let's dive into Test of Courage, which
Yeah, let's
was
do it.
written by Justina Ireland. As you mentioned, it released January 5th, 2021, which I believe was like the day that they launched like 3 books at once. I think that was Into the
Yeah,
Shadows, Light of the Jedi, and A Test of Courage on the
yeah.
5th.
Light of the Jedi was kind of they did this in phase one, where they did the adult novel, junior novel, and YA all at least releasing within days of each other.
Right. Yeah, and it focuses mainly on Vernestra Rowe, uh, who is 16 at the time, 15 when she had passed the Jedi trials. So she is already a Jedi Knight at the time. I believe they say it's the youngest, or one of the youngest
One of the
at the time.
youngest in generations. Yeah.
Yeah, and she is protecting Avon Starros, the daughter of Senator Jira Starros, who's 12 years old, and they are on a ship called the Steady Wing, and this ship is what's going to be destroyed as it is leaving the Hayleap system. And our main cast of characters is Vernestra, Avon, Honesty Weft, who is a boy who is also 12 years old, who is part of the Downen ambassador. Like, he is the son of the Downen ambassador, and her and Avon's protocol droid J6, who is a nanny and protecting droid. And then we also get into Imri, who is going to play a pretty pivotal role here, who is the Padawan of Master Douglas, who will die.
Yeah. Welcome to the High Republic. Somebody's gonna die.
Douglas Sunvale is his name. They just call him Master Douglas a lot instead of like Master last name. Sometimes it's
Yeah.
very inconsistent with Jedi. I feel like Master Yoda, obviously, I guess Yoda doesn't have a last name. They say Master Yoda, but I feel like sometimes they would probably say Master Windu for
Yeah.
Mace. It's very inconsistent.
I think it's kind of like how welcoming are they? Like Master Douglas is very chill, whereas Mace Windu is not.
Yeah.
So it's like we have to be more formal with Master Windu than we do with Master Douglas. But I won't spoil anything, but I do wish, because of something that happens in Defy the Storm, that they had used Sunvale a little bit more. And I'll
Oh,
just tease
interesting.
tease that. There's a line that is connects to Test of Courage. That's pretty cool.
Okay, so then we have Nihil pirates undercover that are going to, cause the explosion in on the Steady Wing. I guess generally, what are your thoughts on the Nihil, who are um, kind of like the main villain of the High Republic so far?
They're fine. Uh, I mean, I like that they didn't go with, some version of Sith
Yeah,
or,
Force
some
using type
lightsaber
thing.
wielding thing. I'm glad they didn't try to, just rip stuff from the EU, like using the Yuzon Bong or something. They didn't
Right.
make it easy, but Marchion is definitely interesting, but I think he'd be interesting even without the Nile. I think the Nile serve the purpose that they are supposed to serve, and that's okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I think I was a little disappointed with them when they were like. It felt like in the pre-release stuff, they were really trying to like pump up their status of like, oh, the Jedi have never fought somebody like this, and they're just
Yeah,
really like a lot of them are just pirates. The thing that about them the most for people that are not familiar is that they're kind of unpredictable at times, right? Like they have these paths that they can cause these issues with hyperspace. They cause a lot of issues with just pretty much being pirates who are willing to just go and smash and grab, and
yeah.
that's pretty much it.
They seek chaos for the sake of chaos.
Yes. Yeah.
Very much.
And yeah, so they blow up the ship, but Vernestra, our main core, Vernestra, J6, Honesty, Avon, and Imri do survive by getting into like an escape pod shuttle type thing. So they do crash on a planet. They find a planet in the system that they're in that is able to sustain life, and they go there, pretty much get like they find cover in a cave, which thankfully they do, because this planet apparently has like acid rain that falls
Yeah.
from the sky.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. If you've listened, if anybody on listening to this has listened to my podcast, they know that I am obsessed with the symbolism of caves and water. And so the fact that they go into this cave, and it's a time when they really explore their shadows and their darkness, and the resentment and anger they have around what has just happened. And then you have this acidic rain. Water we normally think of as baptismal, as something that brings life, but this is destructive, and it takes life, but then also allows for it to rebuild through essentially the evolution of the planet and how it's evolved to deal with these issues. And it's very metaphorical for what our characters are going through. Like they are dealing with this situation where they expected things to go one way. They expected things to bring them life, and instead it brought them death. It brought them destruction. It brought them pain, and very much like the acidic rain. And they are, throughout this story, having to be, in a sense, reborn, to become something more and something better, and doing that through unity, and facing their darkness and facing these emotions that are natural, but we know as an audience that the Jedi stopped accepting, stopped allowing to be considered natural. And we're kind of at that point where the younger Jedi, which we're getting here, have difficulty disseminating between what having the emotions and letting the emotions control you. And that's a very interesting dynamic to see that we haven't really seen before, because we didn't spend a lot of time with the one young Jedi that we had who went dark in Anakin Skywalker. We jumped, from episode 1 to episode 2. So it kind of opens up avenues and conversations that we haven't really seen in Star Wars before.
Yeah. Interestingly, Vernestra has like a modified lightsaber, right? She has a light whip. It goes back to the days of like the Sith Wars. Something I found interesting about this is I remember like these books that were being released when I was a kid, around episode 1, episode 2 time frame, called the Jedi Apprentice series, which focused on Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan
Yeah.
before episode 1. And one of the covers of the book, I forget what it is, somebody has like a pink light whip like this.
Yeah, I
She's
know
a
exactly the
villain
one you're talking
character.
about.
Yeah, yeah. And that was like my first instance of seeing something like that. So I'm kind of glad that they're bringing that stuff back. But um, interesting that she kind of worries about, like, maybe not so much in this book. Maybe that's more of an Out of Shadows thing. But she does kind of worry about having this, and
Oh
like
yeah.
explaining it to Imri even on this. Worried that he's going to think it's like a dark side type thing, and worried that, making this modification without kind of getting approval from her former master Stellan and the Jedi Council.
Yeah, and it's a really beautiful moment too when you think about what will happen later with these two characters. So, uh, you know, Vernestra at the end of the book, offers to, and Emery accepts, offers to make him her apprentice.
Right.
And this is kind of that first moment where we see that Vernestra is going to be willing to take the risk of trusting Emery. And so at the end of the book, when we get Emery starting to fall towards the darkness, it's that trust that they've built with each other. Again, like through being vulnerable, which we owe the planet. I think it's moon actually, but
Yeah, it
doesn't.
is. Yeah.
Yeah. So the moon Wevo that they're on, it forces you to be vulnerable. It exposes you in a very like physical sense. And that's what we're getting internally with these characters, is them being exposed for their insecurities, and having to deal with those insecurities. And Vernestra is, for somebody who is very accomplished and was the youngest Jedi in generations and has, the everything in her portfolio to be completely egotistical, is extremely humble, but also very insecure about, am I ready for this? You would think if your master was Stellan Gios, and he's on the Jedi Council, he'll eventually run Starlight Beacon. Like, he is a big to do. You would think that would give you a lot of confidence, but it's really interesting to see that she's pretty insecure at the start of this book, and it's through the experiences of this book where she really finds her confidence and her footing as a Jedi Knight.
Yeah, very interesting dynamic because she kind of sees Imri as almost like a equal at times, right?
Hmm.
Because they're only like a year or two apart. Like they're not very far apart
Right.
age wise. I think he's like 14, she's like 16 at this time. And that is a very interesting. I'm surprised the Jedi Council allowed this at a certain point.
Right, yeah.
But they did. And yeah, that's how it goes into this end of the book here. But um, definitely an interesting relationship between the two of these. I felt really bad for, Imri as a whole. He loses his master. He befriends this like creature that they call a Hanzi named
Hmm.
Chiri, who dies very quickly. It's really like a chapter later or something.
Yeah, I forgot how I forgot that he dies, let alone that he just gets brutally murdered, just shot. I was actually driving, listening to the audiobook myself, and I remember I jumped a little bit this time when that blaster shot went off because I was like, they don't actually kill him. Oh, he's dead.
Yeah,
He is dead.
that's how I felt driving. I was like, okay, well, that's a cute animal. And then they're like, it's like 5 minutes later almost in the
Yeah,
audiobook. I'm like, why'd they do that? Why did they do that? I hate when animals die or get hurt. So I was very upset.
yeah. It was, but again, like, that's kind of what the High Republic does. It
Hmm.
sets you up to make connections with these characters, and then kills them, and your characters have to deal with that, and that's something that Emery is really facing in this book, and it
Hmm.
exposes his insecurities. When you have a teacher like Master Douglas, who is more relaxed in terms of letting you explore yourself, letting you take risks, and giving you that support, it puts you in a position where sometimes you don't realize that you can do that without them there. I'm a teacher. Right now I teach sixth grade, and kids are extremely afraid of failure,
Hmm.
and intentionally set them up for failure so that they can learn from that. And so, like, they'll come to me sometimes and be like, "Well, am I doing this right?" And I'm like, "I don't know. What do you think? Are you doing this right?" Right? I'm a reading teacher, so it's not like I'm having them do math wrong, but
Yeah.
it forces them to explore the ideas and find the evidence to back it up and find it within themselves and their own thought processes to be able to do that. And Emery kind of gets forced into this position. He doesn't have the safety net anymore. And it's really interesting to see, for me, especially as a teacher, that once that is pulled away from somebody, if you taught them the right way, if you raised them the right way, if you allowed them a space where they could start to explore themselves, they are able to, even though it's going to be a hard process, they're able to eventually realize they can do that on their own without you anyways, which is something we all have to learn at some time.
Hmm.
And I think it's really good if kids are learning that at a younger age, because I certainly didn't. I got into adulthood and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing here. Like, who is letting me do this on my own? I'm about to mess everything up. And I did. And I learned from it. It just happened a lot later than it happened for Emery and finding Vernestra, and even for Vernestra, she really struggles with that same kind of insecurity.
Yeah, and it seems like Imri's uh lack of confidence is also affecting his saber, right?
Hmm.
There's like this whole plot line of like his saber not having a strong like blade when it comes out, like a weak fading blade almost.
Yeah.
It's also implied that maybe he was tinkering with it beforehand, and he didn't do something right. But it definitely seems like when he is having that confrontation with Vernestra at the end, it is like a stronger blade she recognizes, when he's kind of leaning into the dark side there.
Well, I mean, the dark side is quicker, more seductive. It's
Yep.
easier to gain power, and so with the lore that we have around the kyber crystal, I think it makes a lot of sense that somebody who is not confident in themselves is going to have a lightsaber that they're not going to be able to maintain because they're not going to have that connection with it. We kind of get the same idea with the dark saber in Rebels and Mandalorian, where it's harder to wield when you are not connected with it, and when you're using it as um, a weapon, and being that it's a lightsaber, that means it has a kyber crystal somewhere in there, and,
Hmm.
and it's because of that connection through the Force. And so the to me, the kyber crystal and the person create this bonding connection. And so when that connection changes, when it weakens in particular, it's going to have an impact. And so, yeah, again, like the symbolism of him slipping to the dark side and that lightsaber becoming stronger
Yeah.
is really a really cool idea. That again, like this book to me is a pure form of Star Wars. It hits all the Star Wars themes and elements that make Star Wars, and that is one of them. But it also does it in a new way. And again, like the lightsaber is symbolic of that. The lightsaber whip in and Emery's insecure, or excuse me, Vernestra's insecurities around it is something new. We've never seen
Hmm.
somebody feel bad for wielding the weapon that they wield. You closest we have to that is Luke throwing away the saber,
Yeah.
particularly in Last Jedi. But that's not so much about the weapon itself as it is the consequences of that weapon.
Somebody that's very interested in kyber crystals is Avon. She's actually
Hmm.
gonna get Imri's kyber crystal at the end here, from his destroyed lightsaber after the confrontation. She will steal that. Um, so I guess let's, before we kind of get to the end of the story, transition into talking about Avon and Honesty, who kind of go through their own thing of, uh, you know, Avon's very, how would I word this? She's like the outgoing one that'll just like poke and prod you, while Honesty is somebody that's on the very opposite end of that. So at first they kind
Yeah.
of have like this contentious relationship at the beginning, but they kind of they resolve that at the end. Like she's gonna help Honesty get um, the time with the Senate to talk about the Downen stuff that's going on there, and he requests audience with them. So they definitely patch that up and stuff. But what do you think about those two relationship and just their characters in general?
Uh, Avon felt very much like the kids that I teach, and stubborn and hard headed, and a lot of time asking questions that you don't really want to answer. So I really, really liked that. She's a fun character, and we revisit her in Defy the Storm, and you see the way that the story of Test of Courage has really changed her, which is pretty cool. So I really liked her. I thought she brought great humor to the book. I thought that she was kind of the conscience. She's the Jiminy Cricket of everything, where it really doesn't give you the answer, but pushes you towards finding those answers. So that was really cool. Um,
Yeah, because we learned she doesn't like. She thinks it's wrong to kill, right? Like,
right,
they mentioned that a few times in the book, where like she, like, Honesty was feeling the anger and stuff from his dad dying on the ship, and she understood that, but she also just felt like that's like still not right to
right.
want that type of revenge.
And I mean, that reading this book this time was I've probably read it. This was probably the third or fourth time that I've read it, and it might have been the most impactful because we unexpectedly lost my dad a little over a year ago, and I
Mm. Sorry to
forgot.
hear that.
Oh, thank you, thank you. But I forgot about that element of the story when I was reading this, and for me personally, like I see Emery and Honesty as the inverse of each other, the same two parts of the same person that we would experience in real life. And Justina Ireland uses those two characters to show these different parts of grief and trauma, where you have the characters like Emery who want revenge, and you have the characters like Honesty who are just sad and trying to understand things. And for anybody else who has experienced, especially an unexpected loss, when you don't have time to prepare for it and wrap your head around it, that's exactly the avenue that you go. Like, I mean, just to be totally honest, like I was trying to find somebody to blame, to take out, to, when my dad died, but I also was barely able to function as a human like Honesty. And it was both of those at the same time. So that really connected with me this time, of the idea of how we are this multitude of people. And I really loved how Justina Ireland took that idea and split it into these two characters to be able to tell both stories and both um, kinds of grief in the same fashion. That was really, really cool.
Yeah, and Avon, she also is she has J6, the droid, that she's tinkered with, and is that's where a lot of the comic relief comes from too. Is J6
Yeah, J6 is great.
has been tinkered with, so that way she can have her own personality and learn on her, like, self-learning type thing of
Yeah.
not obeying her original programming. So at first she starts off very like typical protocol droid, but as it continues throughout the story, she becomes less of like, I don't feel like doing that, right? Like,
Yeah.
and some of her pushback to Avon when they're like in the cave and she's like, I was just staring off in space. Like, I'm just thinking, like, they're like, what are you thinking about? She
He
still
goes
helps
from
them.
C3PO to like L3.
Yes. She goes from like, uh, having to do something, but then actively choosing to help, right? Like she'll
Hmm.
still do the thing that Avon asks for usually. Like, hey, find like do a study on this for us, and then she'll like on if the fruit is able to be eaten, right? And uh she's in the middle of something else at that point, but she still does choose to like check the fruit.
Right.
So she is actively still being ultimately good. But yeah, she's a very funny character that adds some comic relief into the story. That's pretty dark for a middle grade
It's
story.
very, very dark. It's dealing with some huge, huge concepts. And I mean, again, that's a very Star Wars thing, to have a droid that provides comic relief while you're facing these stories of trauma and loss and pain, and the emotions that it brings out in us, and the way that we react to those things. You've got to have some humor there. Otherwise, it's just really dark and depressing, uh, which is fine at times. A la, I mean, go read Phasma or Inquisitor: Rise of the Red Blade. Like, Delilah Dawson does a great job of, nope, we're going all dark with no humor, and that can work too. But especially in a middle grade novel, you definitely need that humor to make it work. Otherwise, you're asking your main audience, to deal with things that they may not be completely ready to deal with, um, and might not have the support to deal with, and that humor makes it a little bit lighter. And I think that's a really good thing to do. And one of the things that Justina Ireland really is masterful at is finding the balance between telling these very real and raw stories, and making them palatable to where you don't become overwhelmed with, like, Delilah Dawson's writing is intentionally overwhelming with the amount of pain that it has in it. And Justina Ireland wants to find that balance a little more. And I think both are different, but both do it in a really, really skillful way.
Sorry, my dog was barking. So I just want to make sure he's not gonna bark. Okay, he's good.
All right.
Um, yeah, no. So I guess let's get to the like to the big climax here. So mainly
Right.
the Nihil that were on the ship and blew it up also are kind of crashed on this planet. They landed on this moon, and then I guess when they were moving the rock to find the cave, right, is when like big rock crashed into their ship and caused them to be stranded here, which is kind of funny because it's like the Jedi were the ones to accidentally have kept these dangerous people on this moon, but it's also a blessing for them to be able to capture them. And they
Right.
do go capture them, but Imri does have a fight with Vernestra as he is leaning dark side. We talked about it a bit here. He's very upset about the loss of his master, the loss of Chimri, and or Chiri, and is really at this point where he is struggling,
Mm-hmm.
and he wants to kill the Nihil. Part of it is he's feeding off of the anger from honesty too.
Mm-hmm.
That we learn that, and it's kind of clouding his emotions along with that, because we also learn that he has this ability, right, where he feels like he can feel people's emotions.
Like much more than we've seen before.
Yes.
Like not
Yeah.
just, oh, I recognize that you are angry, but he actually feels their anger. Like it becomes his.
Right, right. And yeah, it's not like Yoda saying like I sense fear in you. It's like
Yeah.
I feel the fear. Like it's making me angry.
Yeah.
Type of thing. And they have a fight. Vernestra just totally whoops him, and he learns his place. But they do destroy his lightsaber, and that kind of ends the battle. And they have to make an adjustment to. They are able to eventually get a message out to have people arrive and help. They only have to stay on this moon 2 more days after they capture the Nihil. But I guess any thoughts on this battle here and between the two of them?
Uh I
Happens quite
mean,
quickly
it
in the
does.
book.
Yeah, I think the point of the battle itself is to get us to the end part, where I think we really get to my favorite part of the book, which is when they clearly explain and discuss the nature of the Force, the relationship that a Jedi has with it, and the way that our emotions play into that. And we've gotten those ideas explored before in Star Wars. We get them explored quite regularly in Star Wars, actually, but it very rarely has it been so just clearly and bluntly stated, which I just absolutely love. Like it's not left up to interpretation, what's happening here and the impact of it. So I think the battle itself is just a means to an end to get us to that particular point of character development.
Yeah, like you said, they do become master and Padawan.
Yeah.
But we also get Jedi Master Skier and Keeve Trennis, who come. They're the ones that help pick up the kids and the droids and the two Jedi to take them back. And Avon is very not politically correct when she's asking. She wants to ask about like the regeneration of Skier's arm.
Yes, yes. That's a good moment of humor, that Justina Ireland plays very well.
Yes. And this is when she also will steal the crystal, which
Hmm.
she's been obsessed with. Um, but yeah, so we also had like a like the very end, right? There's an epilogue of a Korin who is part of the Nile named Kara Zu, um, and they're just talking about like the Steady Wing massacre and all that kind of stuff. And also talking about like the coming storm, which is a reference to Rising Storm
Yeah,
that's going to happen later.
yeah. Because at the beginning, like this book happens parallel to Light of the Jedi.
Yeah,
So we haven't even gotten the introduction of Starlight Beacon proper. We've gotten it as an idea, and yeah, the Rising Storm is the start of its eventual downfall.
yeah. Well, yeah, that's the main gist of the story. Was there anything in the book that we didn't touch on that you
Uh,
wanted to bring up?
I mean, I think there's a couple really important quotes at the end of the book,
Hmm.
and so this one is a kind of a longer one. It's towards the tail end of the fight between Vernestra and Emery, and I just really love the way that it explains Emery's position and his emotions and the very natural nature of it, and combines it with what a Jedi is supposed to be. So it says he didn't want to cry. He wanted to be angry, but his sadness was more than he could bear. He began to sob. It isn't fair. It's not. Douglas was good and kind and strong, and those people killed him. And why? For nothing. And then Vernestra says, we're going to find out why, Emery. And you can be angry, but giving into your rage, letting that single emotion drive your actions, that is a direct path to the dark side. We can bring those people to justice, but what that looks like is not up to us. We serve the Force, and the Force does not pick sides. I just absolutely love that idea of what justice is, what the role of a Jedi is. Like, we in the prequels get a Jedi that are trying to become judge, jury, and executioner, essentially. We even see that with Ahsoka and her being exiled from the Jedi Order, and then them going,
Yeah.
"Oh, whoops! Like, actually, this was your great trial. Gotcha."
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you are being who you're not supposed to be. You are forgoing what it means to be a Jedi, and to have this story where we see somebody start to go towards the dark side and be able to pull themselves out of it, not by foregoing their emotions, but by coming to understand their emotions, is really powerful. And there's another point when this is a little bit before that, when Emery is talking about he's recognizing his anger at the mention of his dead master, and it says he reached for the Force, but as he did, his anger, which had been fueled by Honesty's rage, began to melt away, and for the briefest moment his master's hand rested on his shoulder, and so this would be Master Douglas's voice talking to him, saying, to be a Jedi is to always trust the Force, that the Force works in mysterious ways, Emery. We accept and we try our best, but we do not forget that all ends as the Force wills it. And for me, the Jedi of the prequels just went, the Force works in mysterious ways in a very dismissive manner, which a lot of times, not to get on to religion in particular or anything, but a lot of times that's a very dismissive way that modern religions will say, like, oh, your pain is not valid. And here I like that it's a way that they use it, and it's kind of in in Vernestra's quote that I read earlier too, of this is a truth that is hard to handle, but you have the tools to be able to handle it. And the way that you're feeling is valid. And that's not necessarily something we've gotten a lot in Star Wars. We haven't got a lot of, haven't seen a lot of validating the way that somebody feels. We get more of that in the sequel trilogy. And it's not necessarily that they always ignore their emotions or dismiss their emotions, but they don't necessarily take the time to let them harbor that grief and that pain and let that be okay. Like, you are probably thinking what I'm thinking right now, which is like season 4 of Rebels is like half of
Right.
is that. So I just really like that they're exploring that in different avenues of storytelling. Like, I think it's really important to the nature of what it is to be a Jedi and what it means to relate to the Force. And I'm really, really hoping we get some more of that explored as we get to the tail end of the High Republic with the Acolyte.
Yeah, I mean, that quote that you had at the end there is something that stuck out to me too while I was, listening to the book as I was driving. It was a very great passage where Emery is feeling that way. And yeah, I mean, because I feel like the High Republic is actually kind of the start of, I don't want to say the downfall, but it's kind of the start of the politicalization of the Jedi, right?
Oh,
Like,
absolutely.
not to get too much into it, but like they work so much in tandem with the Republic in the episode 1, right? Like,
Yeah.
they are sent by the Chancellor to go do this uh thing, Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, to talk about to the Trade Federation. In this, it's like, originally when it first started, they're not really as aligned with the Republic. Like, they work for what the Republic does and believes in, but they weren't like taking just like missions from the Chancellor
Yeah.
and everything. And this kind of starts changing that a bit, is in this period of time where the Nihil, and especially with the disaster of the hyperspace in Light of the Jedi really starts causing that domino effect,
Oh,
where
absolutely.
that leads us to episode 1.
Well, and I think the very end of the Rising Storm, if you were looking at the Star Wars history books and they were teaching about the fall of the Republic, that would be the Ferdinand and Isabella of of
Oh
World
yeah,
War One
yeah.
kind of moment, where there were definitely factors in play before that, but that was the moment when you can clearly point from this thing to everything else. And so I like that they are setting those things up, but not focusing on those things, because there is so much time in between there. But it's definitely new and different from what we've gotten before, and I think the way that they are doing it in just giving subtle hints and allowing you to fill in the blanks is a lot of fun, to be honest.
All right, well, that'll wrap up a test of courage. Brandon, thank you so much for
Oh, thanks for having me.
coming on. You want to share where people can follow you? You mentioned a podcast earlier. If you want to share what that is and where people can find it.
Yeah, so you can find my podcast network, Clashing Sabers, on any of your podcatchers. You can follow um, our socials at Clashing Sabers everywhere. We have currently 4 different shows on the network. You get all in one feed, so it's not just me. I've got like a ton of other people behind me who are creating content, and our biggest hub is probably our Facebook group. So you can find all of our stuff there. And then if you like Test of Courage, if you enjoy Star Wars books, if you want to share these stories more, we also have a nonprofit branch that puts Star Wars books into classrooms across the country.
Oh
So
wow,
you
that's
can
awesome.
go over to our Patreon, patreon.com/clashing sabers, and join up there. 100% of the money that you donate goes directly towards buying and shipping those books to the kids. And they are specifically for, I go, once we get a teacher nominated, I go buy books specifically for that teacher's set of students. So they're not just getting a bunch of random books, but we've had the privilege of helping, kindergarten autistic kids with textile type books, all the way up to, urban and rural high schools and everything in between. And we say, we don't just send like 10 books. It's not like, here's just a little gift. Like, we're sending hundreds of dollars of books to them, and that's because of our patrons. So if you want to be a part of that, definitely go over there and join for $1 or even more if you want to.
That is awesome. Great stuff. Great stuff. So over here on this podcast, of course, we'll be releasing these as we continue building up to the Acolyte. More of these books about Phase 1 of the High Republic book discussions. But you can follow all of us here on at podawakens on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Threads, all that good stuff. And email us podawakens@gmail.com. Thank you all for watching or listening along. You can rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or like and subscribe to us here on the YouTube. Have a great rest of your week.